An array is a variable type that stores a collection of similar items. For example, you're writing a program to calculate the average scores for a class with 100 students. Rather than have 100 separate variables that represent each test score, with 100 different variable names and 100 different assignments, you use an array. An array is one variable, but it has 100 spots in it to hold those 100 scores. An array is a named list of data items that have all the same data type. Each data item is an element of the array. You declare an array variable in the same way that you declare any simple variable, but you insert a pair of square brackets right after the type. For example, to declare an array of int values to hold student scores, you can write int open and closing bracket student scores. To create an array of doubles to hold student GPAs, you can write double open and closing square brackets student GPAs. You can name your arrays anything you want, but typically Java programmers follow the same rules they use for other variables. Array names start with a lowercase letter and use uppercase letters to begin the subsequent words. Some programmers use the convention that arrays are always named with a plural noun, such as student scores, or they add a word at the end that implies a group, such as student scores list, or student score table, or student score arrays. After you create an array variable, you need to reserve memory space for it. Declaring an array and reserving memory space for it are two distinct processes. To reserve memory space for 100 student score values, you can declare the array variable and then create the space allotment in a second line. This creates a new array called student scores that holds the variable types ints, and then it reserves 100 spots to put student scores in the memory. We can also declare and create an array in one statement by providing the data type, the brackets, and the name of the array, an equal sign followed by the keyword new, the data type again, and inside the square brackets holds the number of spots that we want to reserve. In this example, we have a double array that holds student GPAs, where we've reserved 100 spots to hold student GPAs of the double type. So what happens whenever we declare and initialize our array? In the memory, it creates a block of variables called an array, and it creates those empty spots for it. The subscript is the integer contained within the square brackets that specifies which of the array elements you're currently working with. In Java, any array elements are numbered beginning with a 0, and they go up to the length of the array minus 1. So whenever you're working with an array, it always begins at 0 and goes up to the last value minus 1. So if your array has 20 items, 20 elements, your subscripts will go from 0 to 19. If you're working with 100 elements, your subscripts will go from 0 to 99. When the values inside of each of the array spot is initialized, they're initialized to a default value. So in the case of ints, they're initialized to 0. In the case of doubles, they're initialized to 0. And in the case of strings, they're just initialized to a null string. So whenever we want to set values for the specific places inside of the array, we're going to use the name of the array followed by the subscript inside of the square brackets, the equal sign, and then the value. So this is going to put 96 into our first spot inside of student scores. Likewise, here in student score, at the subscript of 1, we're going to place in the value of 97. 2, we're going to place in 88. In the third array subscript, but the fourth position, we're going to put in 87. And finally, in the last spot, at subscript 4, we're going to place in 68. So after creating the array and assigning the values, our array now looks like this. It still has the length of 5, but it has these values in for the array elements. What happens if we try to put a value inside of a spot that is not there? So in our case, our array only holds 5 elements, but we are trying to put something into the 6th position. If we use a subscript that is too large for an array or too small, as in a negative number, the subscript is out of bounds and will receive an error message. Another way to declare and initialize an array is to provide an initialization list. An initialization list is a list of values separated by commas and enclosed within curly braces. Providing values for all the elements in an array is also called populating the array. After running this statement, we'll have an array called student scores. It will hold ints and it will be of the length of 5. When you populate an array by providing an initialization list, you do not give the array a size. The size is based on the number of values you place inside of the list. After you initialize an array using a list, you can still change the value inside of an element. So for example, if I want student score at position 1 to be 66 instead of 97, I can just call student score, call the subscript, and assign it a new value. And that will make my array look like this instead, where 66 is now in the place at student score at subscript 1. Arrays have a special property called the length. You use the name of the array .length and it will return how many elements are inside of the array. With that knowledge, you can find out what the first and the last element in the array is. The first element in the array is always 0, and the last element in the array is always the length minus 1. We can capture the length of the array inside of an int variable, and with that we can use it as a loop control variable or to reassign certain positions inside of the array. When working with arrays, it's important to understand that all the data types inside the array will be the same. So if I try to put in 87.7 in one of my students' scores, I'm going to receive an error because my array does not accept doubles, it only accepts integers. Likewise, if I try to put in a string, I would also receive an error because my array only accepts integers. It's important to be comfortable with the subscript. Remember, the first element inside of our array is at 0. Our last element inside of our array is at the length minus 1. If you receive an out of bounds error, it means that you're using a subscript that is either too small, so less than 0, or too large, so greater than the length minus 1. Now we're ready to start creating and initializing our own arrays.